here again. So yeah, and those online. So happy to see you all. And Shanti, actually, can you put this on the gallery view so I can see the people online? I have to keep an eye on Dipti, see what she's doing there. Yeah, I'm very happy to be able to come. Oh, yeah. That was good. Perfect. Gallery view. It's under view. You see on the top there. Oh, yes. Yeah. Gallery. Second from yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, I'm very happy I could come to the center this one last time. I haven't been to the center the last year because I think most of you I told already, but although I've been in not in Balakupe during the last year, but in in Hunzor, near Hunzor, Gurupura. It's a village about 20 minutes drive from Hunzor, at the Geshe Tantra College. But when the Geshes are at the Tantra College, like one of the things that traditionally try to do is not miss anything. Like go to every event, go to all the pujas, go to all the classes, go to all the debate. And so for 1 year, you try to just participate fully in the program there. And because the Geshes, when we finished, so just like a couple of weeks ago, we had attained the same degree that the Gyume monks who do their entire study program at Gyume Monastery for 15 years. They graduate with called a Ngak Ramba. So it means like a master's of Tantra. Ngak means Tantra in Tibetan. So we get the same degree, but we're only studying there for 1 year. So there's also expectation that you really, try to participate fully in the program for 1 year, which means, and part of, this fits well, see with the Introduction to Tantra program today. So part of like practicing Tantra is that you do so in secret, right? So they have, the Gyume, because it's a mantra, a monastery, that it's a monastery who focuses on study and practice of Tantra, whereas a monastery like Serije, my monastery, has very little to do with Tantra. It's focused on the sutra teachings of the Buddha. But at Gyume Monastery, they fit different aspects of tantric practice and teachings into the monastery sort of customs in different ways. So one custom they have is only announcing things like shortly before they actually happen, as a sort of method of secrecy, right? So as the Geshes who are there for the first year, we have a rough idea of the way things are going to happen during the year, and some of the dates, because they do publish a calendar, but we don't really know for sure exactly what day things are going to happen or what day they're going to start. So usually, if there's like a set of pujas we have to attend, they don't announce until the night before, and about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I was just telling JC and Archana over coffee that one of the first things the Geshes do when they go there is make a WhatsApp group. So then they send out, there's one person from Gyume Monastery in charge of telling us when things happen, and they'll send out a message at like 9 o'clock at night saying, "Oh, tomorrow morning's puja starts at 4:30 or 5 or 5:30." And then we go to the first session, and then after the first session's done, it's usually between 2 and 3 hour sessions. We come back to our room and we have to check our phone again, and there'll be another message appear that says the next session starts in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then the next session, the same thing like that. So every session we're checking our phone. And then if there's maybe only one session in the morning puja, then after that, then one of the teachers, the main teacher, who explains different texts to us, he'll get a message about that, and then he'll send a message and say, "Okay, class starts at 9 o'clock this morning, or class starts at 9:30 this morning." So then we'll rush off to class. So anyway, in short, like I couldn't come to CKSL during the whole year because it's just every day there's something happening, and even though there might be a few days off, you don't know until like the day before or that morning that you have a couple days off. So it's impossible to schedule like with the center. Yeah, and then in the day after tomorrow, then I'm flying out to go to pilgrimage in northern India. So I'm glad this couple days this weekend I was able to come to the center and meet with you all again. So for this session, we have almost 3 hours. So I thought so I chose this topic, Introduction to Buddhist Tantra. One is because, over the years I've been coming to teach at CKSL. It often happens that people will newly come to the center. They'll hear about this center that teaches Tibetan Buddhism in Bangalore, and then they'll come. And most people who come, I think, are interested in just basic meditation, or some of what the Dalai Lama teaches, or some kind of mind science. But then once in a while you get people who just want to know about Tantra. And that's all. They don't want to know about refuge, don't want to know about bodhicitta. They just want to know about the power of mantra. And sometimes people say, because they heard from their own teacher in a different tradition, that Tibetan Buddhist Tantra is something very powerful. Sometimes to help overcome like obstacles or some kind of misfortune, sometimes to remedy sickness, or or to accomplish like things of this life, success in this life. So for different reasons, sometimes there's regularly happens that people come to the center wanting to know about Tantra, and with a lot of misconceptions about Tantra, about what Buddhist Tantra is. So, in order to clear up some kind of misconceptions, not that any of you all have, I know you all have been coming regular for a long time mostly, but maybe in order to help you all explain to others, because I won't be here in the future, of course, other very good teachers coming, Venerable Legtsok, Venerable Keldon, and others. But since you are the ones who are regularly here, then when you meet other people and they ask you about Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, then so you have more confidence that you, but essentially, what it is. But then also, since I've been studying Tantra this past year at Gyume, then it's something very much on my mind. Yeah, and it is, Buddhist Tantra is really one of the kind of rare and precious jewels of Tibetan Buddhism and of the ancient Nalanda tradition, that the Tibetans have preserved for over 1,000 years, and now are making available to people in India, the land of the origin of Buddhism, and also in the wider world. So although especially in ancient India, in old times, even now, Buddhism, Tantra is something, Buddhist Tantra is something taught and practiced largely in secret, so that it's accessible only to those who are qualified already to receive and practice those teachings. But these days, with so much information being disseminated widely, then many aspects of Buddhism, many aspects of Tantra and books about Tantra are just kind of easily available to many people. So His Holiness is often said that rather than try to keep things secret, which is just kind of unrealistic, it's important to get clear information, to give people access to clear information in order to reduce misconceptions, and also to protect people from misusing this kind of special set of practices that the Buddha taught, and that were later developed further in ancient India. So so I thought it's good to spend some time like that. So I thought today we'll break the session into two halves, have a break in the middle. So in the first half, I'll just say some things generally about Buddhist Tantra, some of the unique features of Buddhist Tantra and why it's important, and why, even where someone who maybe is new to Buddhism, or has been practicing Buddhism a while, but not so long, why it's good to aspire to gradually reach a state where we feel like we're ready to engage in practice of Buddhist Tantra. And so why it's important in a sense. And then the basic sort of methodology. So I'll explain a little bit, and then we'll meditate a little bit. And then we'll have a break. And then in the second part of the session, I thought to introduce and go through, and we'll practice together this sort of meditation technique, which with very simple visualization, and in a very kind of straightforward way, combines meditations on great compassion and emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, with a visualization that's based on tantric techniques. But His Holiness it's presented in a way that's suitable for anyone to practice. And it's a practice that His Holiness has, in the last 2 or 3 years, His Holiness has, since the pandemic, no, during and then following the pandemic, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been teaching again and again and again, and really emphasizing for his followers to practice. So it's called the all-encompassing yoga mind meditation. And I think, Shanti, did you upload already to the chat for the online? Okay, great. So we'll also go through that and practice that together. But before we do any of that, I thought, since it's my last session here at CKSL for a while, probably, then we'll do the extensive prayers at the beginning of the teaching. So in this prayer book, it's on page 73. It's called Prayers at the Beginning of the Teachings, praise to Shakyamuni Buddha and so forth, the Heart Sutra. So we'll do those. And we'll also read the Foundation of All Good Qualities in the course of that. Okay, so let's just spend a moment in silence, and focusing our mind on our breath or on the mind itself or on the visualized object. Take some object of meditation and then spend a minute focusing your mind and checking the state of your mind in preparation to generate a virtuous motivation. So then in generating a positive motivation for this session, in general, we want to just focus on and enhance our natural wish to do something good, basically. But then to develop that further and also make that aspiration, that wish to do something very good, to make it pure by making sure it's not tainted with desire for just the selfish happiness, just a wish for something for ourselves alone, and just the happiness of this life, right? So we want to generate a motivation in recognition that this life is just something short and temporary. And remember that this life is coming to an end, right? Death is certain to happen. And when death will happen is not sure at all. And that the existence, the time of our existence after death is much longer than that of just this life. So by remembering impermanence and death, then we remember that just the appearances and the activities of this life alone are not so important. It's more important to prepare for future lives and the main way to do that is by cultivating positive qualities of mind, of behavior and positive actions of body, speech, and mind. And since the mind, our motivation is the is the sort of the catalyst for actions of body and speech. And we focus on generating, positive intention for all of our actions in the mind. And then the other thing is to not only to cut attachment to just the pleasures of this life, but to cut, as I said, selfish concern by remembering the kindness of countless others in this life, and then similarly in past lives. So by remembering impermanence of death, we try to generate a motivation to achieve something good, some well-being that transcends just this life and continues into future lives. And then by remembering the kindness of others, we transcend our selfish concern and generate the aspiration that whatever we do in this session is a benefit, for countless other sentient beings, not just ourselves alone. And then finally, a third way to generate a virtuous motivation is to remember the kindness of our teachers and think that, whatever we're doing in this session, may it be in accordance with the instructions of our teachers, pleasing to the minds of our teachers, and may it become an offering of practice to spiritual teachers. So in short, try to generate a bodhicitta motivation, that thinking in order to free all sentient beings from suffering and lead them to a temporal and ultimate happiness of full enlightenment. Self must become fully enlightened, therefore I'll engage in this session. And then because this session has to do with Tantra, then the special tantric sort of bodhicitta motivation is to think, not only must I become enlightened in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to other sentient beings, but I must do so as quickly as possible. Because there are many sentient beings to whom I have a special karmic connection with, by having been their child or their parent or their close friend or partner or sibling, this life or recent past lives, such that if I become enlightened, then I have a special ability to benefit them in a way that others don't. And that since many people who might have this kind of connection with, they might not have a connection with any other person who is enlightened or may become enlightened in the future, then the longer my enlightenment is delayed, the more suffering they experience. Human realm or in the animal realm, in the hell realm, and so forth. So therefore, having affection and compassion for countless other sentient beings that I have a strong karmic connection with, and finding that their suffering completely unbearable for even the shortest moment, generate a sense of urgency that I must become enlightened as quickly as possible. Therefore, I'll practice the path to enlightenment taught by the Buddha, through which I can most quickly become enlightened, and that's the path of Tantra. So therefore, I'll engage in this session. And then we can begin with this praise to Shakyamuni Buddha and the three jewels, and the other preliminary. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, you, completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, one gone beyond, the co-destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout. Homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atom in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the flow of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on Mount Sahotra's mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is also not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not efficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance and no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of mind without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond error to reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as true, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Om Gate Gate Taragate Palasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasava, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, Shara Variputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and the honor the word of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, joy and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And then I and all surrounding sentient beings go for refuge to the Buddha, go for refuge to the Dharma, go for refuge to the Sangha. We prostrate to the great mother Prajna Paramita, surrounded by all the children and by the assemblies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Depending on my prostrations to all of you, may these words of truth be actualized. In the past, the Deva king Indra dispelled the Maras by reflecting on the profound meaning of the wisdom gone beyond and reciting in daily recitation. In that same way, I also reflect on the profound meaning of the recite the profound words in daily recitation. May all diseases, spirit possessions, bad conditions, all the negative directions, that which happens due to past karma and immediate conditions, may all this be dispelled. May it become non-existent. May it be pacified. I prostrate to the gathering of bikinis and three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By the powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother, her child. Om Akasamara Sashadara Samara. Samara Sashadara Samara. Ayata Gade Gade Paragade Parasamba. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. Shantim Kuriya Soha. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. The host of 80,000 obstacles be. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And auspiciousness and perfect happiness. Then we'll skip the lineage prayers to just the last two verses. So in my book, it's on page 92. The last two verses of lineage prayer, where it says, request to all spiritual friends. On page 92 here. I is to view all the vast teachings to bring gateway to liberation for the fortunate, using skillful means to lovingly subdue. To the illuminating spiritual friends, I make request. May I not arise heresy, even for a second, about the actions of the glorious Guru. May I regard whatever actions are done as pure. With this devotion, may I receive the Guru's blessing in my heart. And then we'll read the foundation of all good qualities, especially because it has the last three verses are related to Tantra, last 3 or 4 verses. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me with a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all other migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train the supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. I develop only bodhicitta, but I don't practice the three types of morality. I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. So from here is the Tantra. The next three verses are expressly on Tantra. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samayam. As I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the four sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. In all my lives, never separated from perfect Gurus, I enjoy the magnificent Dharma by completing the qualities of the Gurus in the past. May I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Then a short mandala offering. Saji Oi Ching Sam Ching Te O Do Ching Do in perfect pure Lama from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom. Please release your rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Yedam Guru Ranamanda Kamya Sangye Chodam Soki Chodam Janju Badi Dani Chabsuchi Dagi Sani Jibe Sonanki Drola Penshe Sangye Dro Partial. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. Dharma and the Supreme Assembly. The two collections I create, I explain the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. And the Buddha, the Supreme Assembly. The two collections I create, we explain the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all. So at the end of that, actually, it's good to visualize that the field of refuge, which I didn't describe at the beginning, but you can imagine Shakyamuni Buddha. He's very pleased with our having offered these praises and yet recitations and positive motivation. So from all the pores of the body of Shakyamuni Buddha, first infinite white light rays radiate out, purifying all sentient beings around. So one light ray. On the tip of each light ray is an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha. So one light ray, the emanation comes to the crown of our head and fills our body completely with blissful white nectar, purifying every obscuration of body, speech, and mind. The same for all the sentient beings seated around us. Their bodies are completely filled with blissful white nectar, completely purifying their body and mind. And then golden light rays radiate out from the pores of Shakyamuni Buddha's holy body. Again, on the tip of each is the emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha. So one emanation comes to the crown of our head, and from that flows down blissful golden nectar light, which completely fills our body and causes us to have perfect health, happiness, and develop all the realizations of renunciation, and great compassion, wisdom realizing emptiness up to full enlightenment. Same for each and every sentient being imagining around us. And then imagine Shakyamuni Buddha shrinks in size, like the size of a grain of rice, and comes to the crown of our head. And then, like a drop of a nectar, flows down, comes down through the crown of our head and abides in the center of our heart. And our body, speech, and mind become one entity with the body, speech, and mind of Shakyamuni Buddha. Same for all the other sentient beings around us. And then imagine all the sentient beings around us, from those farthest away, they gradually dissolve into emptiness. To us. And then from from the top of our head, the bottom of our feet, we gradually dissolve into emptiness. So it appears like just fading into space towards the center of our heart. Finally, the indestructible drop at our heart, the very center of the heart chakra, also dissolves into emptiness. So there's just clear space remains. Space is pervaded by our own enlightened mind and energy. So then we'll stop there and relax your attention there. So first, I think I'll go back to the foundation of all good qualities to explain a little bit about those verses I mentioned. On page 95, the verse in page 95, it's the second verse of that page, the verse beginning, having become a pure vessel by treating in the general path. You want to see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So that's the first verse on Tantra. So of course, yeah. So this actually kind of mentions most of the main points I wanted to make about Tantra in this first half of the session. So one is, as a basis for, one of the most important points is, well, first of all, yeah. First of all, in relation to this line, having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, right? So the general path here means the path of sutra, right? The sutra path. So in order to practice the tantric path of Buddhism, the Mahayana Vajrayana, then it's important to practice the sutra teachings of Buddha first and become quite stable in the practice of those, right? So essentially, the practice of the sutra can be subsumed into the development of three realizations: renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom realizing emptiness. So before so without saying much about those, because most of you are quite familiar with those already, but before we engage in the practice of Tantra, we should have an understanding of the three levels of motivation that are Dharma, the three Dharmic levels of motivation, and the entire Lam Rim in general, but actually Tantra is also part of the Lam Rim at the very end. But we should have some understanding of why it's not a Dharma, not a spiritual practice, not a Dharma practice to pursue just pleasure, like selfish pleasures of this life alone, right? That's just worldly, the worldly activity, kind of worldly pleasures, and it might lead to some kind of success in this life, but it's fundamentally non-virtuous karma, and so will lead to suffering in future lives. It's kind of just chasing after hedonistic pleasure. So Dharma begins when we turn our attention away from purely selfish concern and away from seeking just the pleasure of this life, and rather we strive to seek sort of stable happiness that transcends this life, that carries us through death and into rebirth in the future, and then eventually to freedom from the samsara. And then the second level of motivation, so is not only to pursue the happiness of future lives, but to pursue the happiness of nirvana, right? The liberation from samsara. But still, that's primarily self-centered. And then the third level of motivation, the one we aspire to, is the bodhicitta motivation, where we aspire to not only accomplish the well-being of ourselves, but to accomplish the well-being of countless other sentient beings who are just the same as us, as in wanting to have happiness and wanting to be free from suffering. So, so renunciation is the wish to be free from suffering of samsara. So, in order to generate a stable, stable motivation of renunciation, of course, we're not talking about actual renunciation, but which is uncontrived, but talking about contrived renunciation, which we need to think about and make effort into generating that attitude. So, but that requires an understanding of what samsara is, of how we take rebirth, why we experience fortune and misfortune in this life through the force of karma, how we experience sickness, old age, and then death, and then what happens through the experience of death, and then the in-between state, the bardo, and how we take rebirth through the force of karma and afflictive emotions, and then how that happens again and again and again, and it will happen infinitely, like without end in the future, so long as we don't eliminate the fundamental causes of taking rebirth. So on the basis of that, and that's described by the Buddha in the first two of the Four Noble Truths, right? The truth of suffering and the truth of the origins of suffering. In that is a description of how we take rebirth in samsara. So an understanding of that, of how we take rebirth in samsara, is the basis for generating a genuine wish to be free from that process, and also understanding why it's actually the case that we can be free, that it is possible to be free from that process, right? So we need that understanding to generate renunciation. Renunciation being the uncontrived wish that arises spontaneously day and night to be free from the suffering of samsara. But that's still a primarily self-focused motivation. So in addition to that, we need to recognize that others, our kind mother and father, siblings, friends, teachers, neighbors, in this life, those in past lives and the life before that, they're just the same as us in being trapped in this ocean of samsaric sufferings, and with the potential to experience the bliss of nirvana, to freedom from that. So why should we consider ourselves any more important than any of those others? Because our wish for happiness is just the same, and our potential for infinite happiness is just the same. So thereby, and every happiness that we've had until now, including any realizations on the path, all comes about in dependence upon other sentient beings. So therefore, the most meaningful thing we can do with our lives is use our lives to work for the welfare of other sentient beings. So seeing that, and then seeing that the most effective state from within which we can benefit sentient beings is a state of full enlightenment, right? So seeing that, then we aspire to achieve full enlightenment in order to benefit countless other sentient beings, and that's the attitude of bodhicitta. So we need renunciation, and then a stable kind of stable understanding of and stable kind of attitude of bodhicitta, in short, aspiring to generate uncontrived bodhicitta. And then to actualize these aims, freedom from achieve full enlightenment, we need to very logically and critically understand, well, what are the causes that we suffer, and what is the and what is the antidote to the causes of our suffering. So it's important to understand how it's our fundamental ignorance grasping at a kind of exaggerated sense of self, grasping at a self that exists from its own side, independent of causes and conditions and independent of our own mental imputation. So this exaggerated sense of self leads to this kind of um, selfish concern, right? A warped sort of selfish concern, which leads us to be uncaring about others. So seeing that at the root of that is this fundamental ignorance, grasping and desiring for a sense of self, then we need to generate the wisdom which sees how we actually exist as an interconnected, as something that's interconnected with everything else in the universe, really. But how, as an individual person, and then the constituents of us as a person, our body and mind, are things that are impermanent. They're changing moment by moment, and they're interconnected with other people, with the environment, and with moments in time. They're changing moments in time, and with our own, and they're interconnected with our own ideas, our own concepts and perceptions. So they're a dependent arising. So independence upon this understanding of interconnectedness, then we can see that the sort of solid, unchanging, singular self that we grasp at is a complete illusion. And we generate the wisdom, realizing the emptiness of that self existing from its own side. So that's probably, intellectually, that's the most difficult to understand of these three: renunciation, bodhicitta, great compassion, and wisdom, realizing emptiness. But those we need to have a stable sort of understanding of, and some experience of those three before we practice Tantra. And then the other thing that's a basis for practicing Tantra is refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? Of course, any practice of Buddhist Tantra is a practice of Buddhism, right? And a practice of of the Buddhist teachings is best done, of course, is best done on the basis of taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So that's not to say that, to use anything taught by the Buddha or any aspect of Buddhist teachings, like just techniques for how to meditate, that we have to become Buddhist. Of course, that's not the case. The Buddhist teachings are just part of a wisdom traditions in the world, and there's something that the Buddha freely offered to anyone who has interest to make use of them, right? So we should continue that practice now, and any aspect of Buddhist teachings that are the sutra aspect of Buddhist teachings are available to anyone, regardless of whether to take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha or not. But to fully engage with Buddhist teachings, it's important actually to create this kind of special, strong faith in the Buddha as a teacher and his teachings and the spiritual community who upholds his teachings. And especially because, to take the vows of pure morality, and it's done so on the basis of going for refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So that's all part of training in the general path, what it says here. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. So then the question comes, like, well, what is it to enter the gateway? What is the gateway of the fortunate ones? And why are those who engage in the practice of Buddhist Tantra considered fortunate? And why is it called the supreme vehicle? So here, so there's different names for the Vajrayana, or the tantric teachings of Buddhism, or the practice of Tantra in Buddhism, right? So one is the Vajrayana, the Vajra meaning like indestructible vehicle. Other is the resultant vehicle, whereas Sutra is the causal vehicle, but the Tantra is the resultant vehicle. Another is the path of secret mantra, or the vehicle of secret mantra. And then another, as it says here, is the supreme. Well, actually, this is just using the Vajra vehicle. Those are the 3 months: the path of secret mantra, the resultant vehicle, yeah, and the indestructible vehicle, the Vajra vehicle. So first of all, it's important to understand that the tantric teachings of Buddhism are all part of Mahayana, right? They're all part of the great vehicle because they're practiced upon the basis of the bodhicitta motivation. Maybe it's also good to mention, just to get some of these common doubts out of the way, is that the main point of practicing Buddhist Tantra is not to like heal sickness. Although there is some power to do that there in Tantra, but the main purpose is not to heal sickness. It's not to dispel like spirit harm. It's not to develop like psychic powers like clairvoyance or other kind of miraculous powers. Although all those things are kind of on the periphery of Tantra, it's possible to achieve kind of powers like that through Tantra. That's not the main point, right? The main point is to quickly achieve enlightenment in order to free other sentient beings from suffering. Yeah, and it's also not, the main point of Tantra is not to like develop powers to affect other people in different ways, right? To do something to affect others or to bring about just success in this life. So those are all misconceptions and misunderstandings of what is the point of Tantra. So then the Tantra, so Tantra. So these different synonyms for the tantric vehicle. Maybe we start with the causal vehicle, because that's the most easy to understand. The causal, whereas the sutra is called sutra is called the causal vehicle, and Tantra is called the resultant vehicle. So why each of those labels, right? So sutra is called the causal vehicle because in the practice of sutra, while especially in the Mahayana, the aim to achieve full enlightenment is the same, but the way we achieve that enlightenment is very different, right? So in the sutra vehicle, where with a bodhicitta motivation, one's aim is to achieve enlightenment, but the method to achieve enlightenment is to accumulate the causes to transform from an ordinary person into an enlightened being, right? So, and the causes are primarily, purifying faults, and then acquiring virtuous karma and acquiring wisdom, right? So we spend time, generating positive attitudes, doing things like making offerings, making praises, reading sutras, doing meditations on the path. But as we do those, we're always engaged, and then so to accumulate merit, and then practices to purify negative karma, like reciting Vajrasattva mantras, or practice of 35 Buddhas, or meditating on emptiness to purify our minds. So there's essentially practices of purification and practices of accumulation of merit. But we do those practices all within seeing ourselves as an ordinary form, as an ordinary person, just like the ordinary form we have now. So within seeing ourselves as in an ordinary way, we're engaging in practices to achieve a result, full enlightenment, which is something very different from our ordinary form, right? It's like, state of full enlightenment is more like, the physical body, the mind is something completely different. So in that way, it's like where we see ourselves in an ordinary form and we accumulating causes to achieve full enlightenment. So now we can counteract or contrast that with the tantric vehicle, which or the resultant vehicle. So in the resultant vehicle, the method of practice to achieve enlightenment, it also includes the same accumulation of merit and practices of purification, but we do so within seeing ourselves in an enlightened form. So another way to express it is that we take the result into the path. Instead of the result being something up high and out there, and us seeing ourselves as kind of as low in relation to that result, in our imagination, we take that result into the path. So we dissolve ourselves into emptiness, and then from within that imagine arising an aspect of an enlightened form, right? And try to imagine what it's like to be an enlightened being, right? As a way of actualizing that potential that we all have, right? So that's why it's called the resultant path. We take, our imagination of what that resultant state is like, and take that as the basis for practice of accumulation and purification. So, then by doing that, because one of the major obstacles to achieving enlightenment is essentially low self-esteem, is this grasping onto the view that I am fundamentally a flawed person, right? With all the ordinary sources of suffering that we have, like sickness, old age, and confusion, and ignorance, and so forth. So, the most direct method to reduce and eliminate this sort of way of grasping at ourselves as something fundamentally flawed is to imagine already transforming into something that's totally without flaws. That's the fullest development of our positive potential, and to identify strongly with that. So that's why it's called the resultant vehicle. We take the result into the path. And then Tantra, my Sanskrit is very poor, so I don't know much about etymology of the Sanskrit terms, but the Tibetan, I've studied a bit. So Tantra is translated in Tibetan as gyu, right? So gyu has a connotation of like a lineage, a continuum, or a lineage. So in another way, Tantra is the path of a continuum. So there's different meanings of that continuum. One is that it carries a sort of blessing that's common in unbroken continuum from Shakyamuni Buddha. But another connotation of the meaning is that we're transformed, this continuum of us as a person, from that of an ordinary being to that of an enlightened being. And here maybe we can mention, so what's another uncommon feature of Tantra is that in comparison to Sutra, is that in the Tantric teachings of the Buddha, then it's explained not only how to transform our minds into an enlightened mind, but how to create the causes for an enlightened body, the physical body of the Buddha. So, so just like as a person, we're something that has constituent parts, which can be subsumed into our mind and our body, physical parts of us as a person, and then the mental aspect, our mental experience. So similarly, a Buddha has enlightened mind and an enlightened physical form, enlightened body. So the enlightened mind of a Buddha, it doesn't directly appear to sentient beings. So it can't directly benefit sentient beings. So what directly appears to and benefits sentient beings is the enlightened body. So that's like when Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in India 2,500 years ago. What people can see is his holy body, right? And then and then that's how the Buddha would benefit beings by teaching the Dharma, by explaining the Dharma. So the Buddha's speech is also a physical aspect of the person, the Buddha. So within the sutra teachings of Buddha, the main practices to achieve enlightenment are generating this attitude of bodhicitta, the aspiration for full enlightenment, and meditating on the wisdom realizing emptiness. And that's the same in Tantra, right? The main causes of achieving enlightened mind are those two, great compassion, giving rise to attitude of bodhicitta, aspiration to achieve full enlightenment, and wisdom realizing emptiness. But in the sutra teachings of Buddha, there's no explanation of how to achieve a Buddha's enlightened body, right? So in the sutra teachings, there's explanation of how to achieve enlightened mind in a kind of coarse way, but there's no explanation of how to achieve an enlightened body, right? So that's only contained in the sutra teachings of Buddha. So that's another reason that the sutra, the tantric teachings of Buddha are important, because they show how to. So of course, our gross body, this flesh and bone aspect of our body, that will cease at the time we die. We take another next life, and those don't go to enlightenment. But what does go to enlightenment is a kind of subtle energy that goes together with our mind, right? So our minds, and so this is a unique explanation to Tantra, is that together with any instance of consciousness we develop, from looking, eye consciousness, seeing the light outside the windows, to ear consciousness, hearing sounds, to taste consciousness, experience the taste of food, to mental consciousness, like things we think about or remember. Any instance of consciousness has two aspects. There's the aspect of well, the aspect of consciousness, of being aware of an object, right? The aspect of awareness of an object, knowing an object, experiencing an object. But there's also an aspect of like a subtle energy, which, yeah, it's similar to like prana or chi, but there's like a subtle energy that goes along with consciousness, which gives that consciousness the ability to move to its object and engage with the object, right? So, so typically, there's to explain this, there's used an example of like a blind person who has legs is like the energy of the consciousness. It's called a wind. Of the four elements, earth, water, fire, air, is considered like a form of air because it's very light and very subtle and quickly moving, right? But it's one entity with consciousness. So that subtle energy, which is one entity of with any moment or any instance of consciousness, is analogous to like someone who's blind, but they have very good legs, right? So they can walk, but they can move, but they can't see where to go. And the aspect of consciousness of that is like someone who has eyes, who has good eyesight, but their legs, they don't have legs, or their legs are paralyzed, so they can't move. So together, so the aspect of consciousness is like the ability to see and experience objects, but it doesn't have the energy to move to and engage with objects, right? Whereas the aspect of the subtle physical energy that goes along with any consciousness and is one entity with it is like has the energy to move to and engage with objects, but itself doesn't have the ability to see and experience objects. So this explanation is unique to Tantra, that any instance of consciousness, it's accompanied by this kind of subtle energy. So it's that subtle energy, and that subtle energy even moves from life to life, right? So whereas our gross body, at the time of death, our gross body ceases to function. It's this subtle energy which animates the body, right? That's why a gross body becomes a corpse when we die, is because the subtle energy which goes together with the mind, when the mind leaves the body, the subtle energy also leaves the body. And that's why rigor mortis sets in and the body starts to decay, because it's no longer pervaded by this subtle energy. So it's this subtle energy that always goes together with the stream of consciousness and moves from life to life with consciousness. That is what can be developed into the body of a Buddha, right? Into the body of an enlightened being. And that explanation of how to harness that, how to access that subtle energy and use it in meditation and meditative practice is only explained in Tantra. So that's why it's said that, Tantra is also called the supreme vehicle, because it's only in dependence upon the Mahayana Tantric vehicle that a person can become enlightened. Actually, in dependence upon practicing the sutra vehicle alone, it's impossible to become enlightened, right? Because it's impossible to know how to generate the causes of an enlightened body, the physical body of a Buddha. So therefore, it's to actually become enlightened, it's important to gradually, and that doesn't mean like I'm not telling you go out and like start practicing Tantra tomorrow. right? But gradually, as it's appropriate for you, for an individual in their spiritual development, then it's important gradually to engage with the practice of Tantra in order to create the causes to achieve the physical body of a Buddha, or the enjoyment body and the emanation bodies of a Buddha. And then finally, let's see. Oh yeah, the Vajra vehicle. So what is Vajrayana? Okay, this fits well. So there's many different meanings of Vajra. So this here you can see actually, because again, I mean, the practice of Tantra and especially like rituals, Tantric rituals are common to both Hinduism and Buddhism. Jainism, I don't think so, but Buddhism and Hinduism, the ancient Indian religions. You can see, I know in some of the Hindu rituals I've attended and watched, they're strikingly similar to like Buddhist rituals. For example, the fire, there's always fire, and then offerings of food, offerings of and drink and flowers, and then offering to Ganesha for auspiciousness and so forth. So the outer kind of and then wearing certain outfits and doing certain praises and using mudras, using some hand movements and symbolism. It's strikingly similar. But one thing I don't think you see, Counselor Geshe pointed this out a long time ago, but gradually, giving more interest to the iconography, symbolism you see in Hindu tantric rituals, you don't see the symbol of a Vajra. I don't think so. You're more familiar with, no? But you know what a Vajra looks like, yeah. Most of you know. It's like, anyway, I won't describe. You mostly know. We don't have one here. Oh, actually, here's a good example. Guru Rinpoche, in his right hand, he's holding a big Vajra. It's a Vajra there. So I mean, that's the hand implement, the Vajra. That's fine. You don't need to pull one out, sorry. You don't see that implement in the Hindu ritual. So that's one implement. That's one symbolism that differentiates Buddhist Tantra from Tantra in Hinduism. But that symbol is extremely important. It represents indestructibility, right? So here, but when we say the Vajra vehicle, in what indestructibility are we talking about? There's two. There's a conventional and ultimate, right? So the conventional Vajra is primarily, and again, there's many levels of meaning of this symbol Vajra, but the main one, and to understand this term, the Vajra vehicle, the indestructible vehicle, the conventional is the most subtle nature of our mind, right? The most subtle level of mind. So this is another thing unique to Tantric teachings of Buddha, is a description of different levels of mind by subtlety, right? And this is not found in Sutra. So there's basically a gross level of mind, like our waking state of mind now, and then more subtle levels of mind, which only manifest at the time of death, typically, and then the most subtle level of mind, which is called the clear light mind of death, right? So, so just like now in our waking state, we can see external things, hear sounds. We can, voluntarily think about things. We have some control over what, where our mind goes and where we turn our attention. But when we go to sleep, our sense consciousness ceases to function, right? So the sense consciousness ceases to function, but the mind is still active, and especially we know that because we have dreams, right? But in dreams, we don't have so much control over our mind. If things appear, we have experiences, but without so much control. So that's an example of like our waking state of mind is more gross, but our dream state of mind is a bit more subtle, right? It's a more subtle level of mind. And that's why probably in the dream state, like many unconscious kind of things express themselves, right? But an even more subtle level of mind is, you won't understand, but the idea is, maybe let's just stick with this pattern. It's like from a waking state, when we fall asleep, because these are our sense consciousness, which are very gross states of mind, because they cease to function, why do they cease to function? Like, why is it we don't see things or hear things um, sleeping? So the tantric explanation is because the subtle wind, there's a subtle wind which keeps our eye consciousness active, and keeps our ear consciousness active. Those winds, they sort of absorb, they cease to function. And that's why we don't have those types of consciousness while we're sleeping. But a mental consciousness, which is more subtle than the gross consciousness, that one's still active when we sleep. And so it's a mental consciousness which produces dreams. So the act of falling asleep is similar to death, right? It's similar to dying. Just like in a similar way as falling asleep, when we die, as we die, gradually also the sense consciousness ceases to function. But yet there's still mental consciousness functioning. And then just like when we die, we fall into, for a time, there's nothing appears at all, like in deep sleep, but then there's appearance of dreams, right? So that's similar to, when we fall asleep. So that's similar to when we die, then for a period, there's nothing appear at all, but then there's a bardo state is similar to dreams. And then after we have a dream, from dreams, we again cease dreaming, go into a deep sleep, and then wake up into the waking state of the next day. So that's similar to taking rebirth, right? But to stick with this, what does Vajra mean? Indestructible. The conventional aspect of Vajra is that basically we have these gross states of mind, which are adventitious. They come and go, they come and go. And then we have more subtle level of mind, which is like dreams. They arise and pass away, arise and pass away. But then there's a most subtle level of mind, the clear light mind of death, which is for an ordinary person, we only experience it at the moment of death, when we die. When the gross and the subtle levels of mind cease to function, then this most subtle level of mind, the clear light mind of death, it becomes manifest. But that most subtle level of mind is what's continuously present from beginningless time. It's present in our continuum now, and is that most subtle level of mind that goes to enlightenment, right? So eventually, when we become enlightened, it's that most subtle level of mind that goes to enlightenment. So that is because it's continuously there, and it's by nature pure. And it's the basis for the ultimate purification and development of positive qualities. So that's indestructible. For any sentient being, that's been there since the beginning of this time. It's there now. It will be there forever in the future. And in that way, it's indestructible. It's Vajra-like. So that's the conventional sort of Vajra nature, indestructible nature that we have. And the main purpose of the tantric teachings of Buddha is to access that most subtle level of mind and utilize it in the path of practice. And that's not found in the sutra teachings of the Buddha. And but how do we utilize? Optimally? How do we utilize that that most subtle level of nature, mind, in practice? Is to realize emptiness, right? So emptiness is the ultimate nature of all phenomena, fundamental nature of all phenomena, which has been there since beginningless time, is there now, and will always be there in the future. So that's the ultimate meaning of the Vajra, or indestructible, is the ultimate nature of phenomena, right? Their emptiness of existing from their own side. So, and then the Vajra vehicle is a way of combining these two, accessing this most subtle level of nature of mind, which is continually present, and utilizing it to realize the ultimate nature of that mind itself and of all other phenomena, right? So conjoining wisdom, realizing emptiness, with this clear light mind, whose nature is great bliss, right? Thereby generating, it's called an innate mind of great bliss, realizing emptiness. Because the nature of that most subtle level of mind is blissful, when it's purified of obscurations. So that's the meaning of the Vajra vehicle. It's the vehicle through which we access this indestructible, pure nature of mind and develop it into a wisdom realizing the indestructible nature, pure nature of all phenomena, right? So the resultant vehicle the Vajra vehicle, the supreme vehicle, and then the vehicle of secret mantra. So I already mentioned a little bit. This I won't say much about, but basically because it to be practiced in secret, because those who don't have a suitable basis for practicing tantra, if they engage in the practice, it can be very harmful. It can give rise to great arrogance and pride. It can also cause one to disturb the winds in the as they flow in the channels, and then cause severe psychological imbalance. It can also cause one to to engage in unethical behavior. Right, it's a danger to engage in unethical behavior and then undermine the rest of the path. And also doing so without the right motivation becomes create a lot of negative karma. So for that reason, that's one reason tantra is to be practiced in secret. And then the secret mantra vehicle, because mantras are used, like sacred syllables are used to invoke the blessings of the guru, the blessings of the Buddha, and also to manipulate the winds as they flow in the channels in the body. So for that reason, it's called the secret mantra vehicle. So and then the holy gateway it's called the holy gateway of the fortunate ones because, as I mentioned earlier, it's the only path by which to actually achieve full enlightenment. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. So the basis of practicing tantra is keeping the pratimoksha vows, the bodhisattva vows, and the tantra vows. As I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teaching of the Holy Guru. Yeah, vows. Vows is a larger category. So all samayas are vows, you can say. But if you divide, vows and samayas into 2 separate, vows are generally like making a commitment or a promise to refrain from certain negative action, harmful actions. Whereas samayas are more generally making a promise or a commitment to engage in virtuous actions, right? So like there's a samaya to keep a Vajrayana bell or to make inner offering. Those are positive actions that we pledge to do, or to do 6-session guru yoga. Those are samayas, or to see our guru in a virtuous way. Those are samayas, pledges to do a positive action. Whereas vows are like to refrain from killing, to refrain from lying, stealing. Those are pledges to refrain from something. Okay, we should take a break now, actually. We take a 10-minute break or so. Okay. Okay, thank you. I see. The main ingredient, the active ingredient.
Conversation is being recorded.
And this is the time, how it should be plus. Yeah. Fine. Thank you very much.
Shanti, you need to stop the record.
Pause. To summarize, review and summarize these kind of few main points I wanted to make about Tantra initially. Yeah, the main thing first is the first point I wanted to just emphasize is that maybe I should say this first. I was just thinking as we stopped for the break that it's a bit usually teachers don't say much about Tantra to people who have not received an initiation, right? The entryway to Tantra is actually receiving an initiation, a tantric initiation. So usually Tantra is taught only to those who have already received an initiation. So something like in this context where I'm speaking much about Tantra to many people who maybe don't have initiation is a bit unusual. So I thought just to restate the reasons is one, in order to dispel misconceptions about Tantra. But two, also it's following a sort of uncommon tradition in the FPMT that Lama Yeshe started, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche continued, and also follows a bit the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. All three of these teachers, my teachers, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Yeshe, not directly my teacher, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they draw a lot on the wisdom in the Tantric teachings of Buddha, even to teach some techniques and some ideas to students who haven't received initiation, just because they feel like it'll be very beneficial to them. In this regard, you can see in examples of some of the books that they've written, like by Lama Yeshe. There's a brilliant book called Introduction to Tantra, which very brilliantly, explains the essence of tantric practice in a way that's accessible to anyone who's familiar with basic Buddhism. So, Introduction to Tantra by Lama Yeshe is a good, resource for you if you want to pursue, understanding of Tantra. And then another book called by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I mean, there's many books by His Holiness, and many have to do with Tantra that are for the public. But one I found especially helpful and profound is called Advice for Dying and Living a Better Life. Advice for Dying and Living a Better Life by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Especially because there he speaks about the different levels of mind. The gross and subtle and more subtle level of mind, and the process of dying, by which we can experience these more subtle levels of mind, and then how at the moment of death it's very important to practice and actually try to utilize the clear light mind of death in the path. It's very powerful. It's because why? Tantra is also called can also be called the quick path. It's quick path enlightenment. So why is it so fast? Is one reason is because it utilizes this most subtle level of mind in the path, and that if we can do that is extremely powerful. So it's easier to realize emptiness with that subtle level of mind, and if we can realize emptiness with that subtle level of mind, it affects us in a very profound and deep way, and we can very quickly eliminate the obscurations to liberation and enlightenment. Yeah. So, but I wanted to kind of, just remind you though, it's not because, especially those of you who don't have initiation and maybe haven't studied Tantra much, but are hearing this explanation now, it's best to not, don't go around speaking to it to just everybody that you meet. No, it's best to kind of pick and choose. In general, our own inner world, our own spiritual practice, our own, and especially our own personal experiences on the spiritual path. It's best to not, I mean, it's quite common sense, but just as a reminder, it's best to not speak about them to people unnecessarily or out of, when it's out of context or without a meaningful reason to speak about them. Of course, there might be some situations where it's useful and helpful to someone to speak about our personal experiences. But otherwise, if we just speak about them in kind of a trivial way in an inappropriate context, it weakens the power and the kind of blessing of our experiences, which becomes an obstacle on the path. So just like with one's own personal experiences on the path, you should sort of keep them hidden, like a fragile plant, that you protect from the strong sun and the wind, and so forth. You kind of keep the kind of tender experiences of your spiritual practice protected from others' opinions and discussion and so forth. Similarly, with the tantric teachings of Buddha are something in a way very fragile and profound, and best practiced in secret, right? So I'm not saying that everything I've said here you need to keep secret, but I'm just saying it's better not to go speaking about kind of in a frivolous or careless way. But one of the reasons I'm explaining these things to you is so that if you meet people who are interested in Buddhism and especially interested in Buddhist Tantra, you can help dispel some kind of wrong ideas that they might have by knowing kind of what is the essence of Buddhist Tantra. So just to review some of the main points I was pointing out or explaining before the break is Buddhist Tantra is practiced only on the basis of a stable experience of renunciation and bodhicitta and wisdom, understanding, dependent arising, and emptiness, right? And then the purpose of practicing Tantra is to quickly achieve enlightenment in order to be of benefit to other sentient beings. So the essential motivation is that in order to, free other sentient beings from suffering as quickly as possible, I must become enlightened. And the reason why it's important to practice Tantra is because it contains methods to achieve the Buddha's enlightened form body, right? The form body of the Buddha. And one unique distinguishing feature of Tantra is that it's the resultant vehicle that we replace our ordinary kind of low, flawed image of ourself with an imagination of ourself as already being enlightened, right? And practice from within that perspective of the imagined result. But therein is where a lot of the danger lies, right? Because if we just start imagining I'm enlightened without really a wholesome motivation, it can cause our arrogance to be even greater and our ego to be even greater. And then that can cause our other afflictive emotions, attachment and anger, to be even stronger. So that's why it should only be practiced on the basis of a very solid understanding and experience of the sutra teachings of the Buddha. And all of that within refuge, within going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And in addition, which I didn't mention much, but on the basis of guru devotion, of having established a relationship with a teacher where we trust the teacher and that teacher trusts us as a student, and then relying on that teacher as a valid guide. So that's extremely important in practice of Tantra. Although, I don't have time to say much more about it now. So those are all of the main points I think I wanted to explain. So now I'd like to turn to this practice that His Holiness has been emphasizing, which is drawn from Tantra but presented in a sutra way. So we don't have time to read through the whole thing, and I think the instructions here are quite clear. I'll take you through some of the verses from Tandakirti and Shantideva and Nagarjuna that His Holiness quotes again and again. And then I'll explain, and then we'll do the essential kind of meditation. But first, before we look at the verses, just to give you an idea of basically what this meditation is like, is yeah, basically we imagine. So if you remember when we at the very beginning of the session, when we went for refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and then at the end I described this visualization of Shakyamuni Buddha coming to the crown of your head, and then coming to your heart, and the same with all other sentient beings, and then all sentient beings dissolving into emptiness, and then oneself dissolving into emptiness and abiding in the state of like kind of. So that's kind of like a representation of the clear light mind of death, right? Is that when imagine everything dissolves into emptiness and we just remain in this infinitely vast space of like pure kind of clear voidness space, but not black. It should be pervaded by a sort of light. So it's described as like in the autumn, like a little before this time of year, when when the dust is all settled and the sky and the air is very clear. So just before dawn, when the darkness of night has been cleared away by the sun's light, but the sun hasn't yet come over the horizon. So there's no like direct rays of the sun yet. But the space is filled with a sort of indirect light. So you can imagine, especially being out in the countryside somewhere, maybe up on a mountain, and being at there at this time, the special time of the morning, a little bit, maybe say 20, 30 minutes before sunrise, and imagine the sky filled with just this evenly filled with this clear light. So that's the kind of appearance you want to generate. So what we do though is similar to that. And initially, because the basis for arising as well, I should maybe take a step back. So one of the most distinguishing that's a practice. So there's a question, well, how do you distinguish a practice as being belonging to the sutra vehicle or belonging to the tantra vehicle? And the main way, Lama Tsongkhapa has a lot, and his followers have a lot of discussion on this, but the main distinguishing feature is the practice of deity yoga, right? Deity yoga, where the person imagines arising in the aspect of a deity. Not found in Sutra, but it is found in Tantra and in all the 4 classes of Tantra, deity yoga. So, and there's a book by the same name by His Holiness Dalai Lama, deity yoga. So, but to practice deity yoga, the method is to first, because it's just as I was saying earlier, it's not this ordinary body that becomes enlightened, right? It's a subtle, most subtle level of mind and the most subtle level of wind, which is like a subtle body that is within us. Like if you think, we have the most subtle level of mind continually in our continuum, and together in one entity with that is this most subtle level of energy, right? And that subtle level of energy is like a subtle body that we have already within us, right? So in a way, it's like, and there's us, the gross person or the coarse person that we label upon this gross levels of consciousness and this gross body. But within us, it's like there's another subtle person that is labeled upon our subtle mind and our subtle energy. Right? So it's that subtle person that goes to enlightenment. And it's that subtle energy that when we practice deity yoga, that arises in the aspect of a deity. It's not that we transform our gross, body of flesh and bone into a deity. That won't work, right? In actuality, and just to visualize that is actually is counterproductive. So to practice deity yoga, one first imagines, there's 2 different ways, but we can just stick like we did earlier. Imagine the entire external environment and all the beings, the other sentient beings within that environment, absorb, dissolve into emptiness. And then we ourselves, especially our body, our gross body, and even our mind, dissolve into emptiness until there's just this most subtle level of mind, remaining. And what appears to that mind, and that mind is like pervading space. And what appears to that mind is this, what I described earlier, like a sort of clear light evenly pervading all of space. So that's all that remains. And then, and when we experience that, we should be accompanied by a feeling of great bliss, like a pure feeling, a pure blissful feeling, experience. And then within that, then we generate compassion for all sentient beings, and remember our wish to achieve enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. And then that aspiration to achieve enlightenment, so it's this blissful mind that arises as like the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for all sentient beings. And we imagine that takes the visual aspect of a moon disk, right? Like a disk of white light at our heart. So we don't have our gross body at that time, but it's at the center of that space arises, one's own mind and subtle energy in the aspect of great compassion, and in the visual aspect appearing as a disk of white light. So that's the first step. And then the second step is to imagine that mind at the same time that we're feeling great compassion for all sentient beings. We realize that this mind, in the nature of great compassion, and this mind which is focusing, wishing to achieve enlightenment for all sentient beings, that mind itself is empty of inherent existence, or empty of existing from its own side. All sentient beings are empty of existing from its own side. The appearance of the moon disk is empty of existing from its own side. In short, everything, is by nature interdependent, and thereby empty of existing from its own side. And so that understanding of the ultimate nature of phenomena, of emptiness, that then we imagine appears as a Vajra, right? Again, this hand symbol that Guru Geshe is holding. So as a Vajra, as a white Vajra, made of light and standing upright on top of a moon disk. So that's the essential meditation. So imagine everything dissolves into emptiness, and there's just a clear light, our clear light mind. And then within that, generate great compassion and bodhicitta. That appears as a moon disk of white light. And then upon that is, and then on the basis of that, we generate the wisdom, realizing the interdependence of all phenomena, and thereby their emptiness of existing from their own side. And then that wisdom mind appears as a Vajra, a white Vajra standing upon the white disk, upon the moon disk. And then we strongly identify that. But it's important as we meditate on that, we don't meditate from the perspective of I'm something else looking at this, but we feel like I am that disk of white light and the Vajra, that's me. So we imagine being that. Right? Okay, but before we do that, and to kind of enhance that meditation, it's helpful to look at these verses that His Holiness the Dalai Lama quotes again and again. And I encourage you to use all of these verses contained here. We won't go through all of the ones here, but all of the verses contained in this booklet are verses from Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Nagarjuna that His Holiness has been quoting again and again and again for many years, and encourages all of his followers, his students, to use in their daily meditation. So I encourage you all to use these verses not only when you're doing this practice, but to fit them in your daily meditation as you can, especially if you're doing 6-session Guru Yoga. So first on page 3, where it says generate conventional bodhicitta, there's a verse by Chandrakirti from the Middle Way, which is a very beautiful praise of compassion. So yeah, we don't have much time left, so I won't go into any detail, but just kind of read and point out some of the main features. So he says, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I will praise compassion at the start of all. So here, Chandrakirti is saying, great compassion. So compassion, seeing the suffering of sentient beings and wishing to free from that, is the main cause. It's like the seed of Buddhahood, the seed of enlightenment. It's the main cause for transforming a person into an enlightened being, right? That's the main point of becoming enlightened, is to benefit the sentient beings. So as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it. So even once one achieves enlightenment, what is it that that causes one to continually engage in activities to benefit sentient beings? Is also compassion. And then the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment. And then not only is it the cause of enlightenment, is it like the source of energy for enlightened activity, but it's the thing that's most rewarding about having achieved the state of enlightenment, is this ability to benefit sentient beings, right? And that also, so that's a source, that's an eternal source of enjoyment, right? Is motivated by compassion, being able to be of benefit to other sentient beings. So therefore, Chandrakirti says, I will praise compassion at the start of all. And then on the next page are these verses by Shantideva, From a Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Bodhicharyavatara. It says, if I do not actually exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in psycho-existence, I shall have no joy. So essentially here, what he means by exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, it means like instead of continually chasing after my happiness, that being my primary goal, to make my primary goal relieving the suffering of others. And whatever happiness I have, to offer that to others, right? So it's a change of attitude where, whereas an ordinary worldly person, they're continually just chasing after their own happiness alone. So to stop making that our main aim and make our main aim to relieve the suffering of others, so selflessly that we're even willing to take that suffering upon ourselves. So, and then only by doing, if we don't do that, then we cannot achieve enlightenment, and even in psycho-existence, we shall have no joy. Then he goes on, whatever joy there is in the world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. So it's a bit of a paradox, right? Desiring all happiness in the world for oneself actually comes from desiring others to be happy. And whatever suffering there is in the world all comes from desiring myself to be happy. What need is there to say much more? The childish work for their own benefit, while the Buddhas work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. That you can think about more on your own. So that's those verses that are the basis for generating great compassion and bodhicitta. So I'll come back to that when we do the actual meditation. And then there's a meditation described here, but we don't have time to go through it now, so we could just leave it. I'll just describe actually meditate. And then we can skip to page 6. It says generate ultimate bodhicitta. So here are the more verses from Chandrakirti, again from that same text, entering the middle way. These are quite difficult verses, so I won't go through them all, but I will read just the last verse and explain that one a bit. Because that one has a very good and simple example. Empty things dependent on convergences, right? So it means dependent upon this kind of interconnectedness, such as reflections and so on, are not unknown. So think about a reflection. Like, what is a reflection in a mirror? A reflection in the mirror, it's something that looks quite solid and real. I mean, it is real, but it appears in a way that it doesn't actually exist, right? When we look in the mirror, it looks like, our face is actually in the mirror. In a way, of course, we know our face is here, but it's just a reflection in the mirror. But the reflection looks to have like some much more solid existence than it actually has. And, and it's very ephemeral. It as soon as we turn the lights off or we walk away, the reflection is gone completely, right? And yet, while it's there, it looks like it's kind of really there, existing from its own side. Yet the way it actually exists is by a convergence of causes and conditions. There's the mirror, which has this reflective surface. And then there's, an object, our face, another object being in front of the mirror. And then there's a presence of light. There's light falling upon our face. and then some of that light falling into the mirror, and then that mirror reflecting the light back, and then that being perceived by our eye consciousness, and thereby, an image of our face appearing back to us arises. So although it's like that reflection, it looks like it has kind of, concrete, solid reality. If we try to touch it or we try to, grasp it, we find, there's nothing there to grasp onto. It's a mere convergence of, causes and conditions. And it doesn't exist in the way it appears. And yet it has the ability to produce an eye consciousness, seeing our face in a way, seeing our reflection. So it has a causal function. So the reason this is important is because many people, when they hear the Buddhist teachings on emptiness and dependent arising emptiness, they jump to the conclusion that if something is empty of having any concrete or findable reality, then it also doesn't have any causal efficacy. It means it cannot produce results. It doesn't have the power to produce, results. What is pointing out here is no, it does, like a reflection in a mirror. So empty things dependent on convergences, such as reflections and so on, are not unknown. And just as from an empty thing, like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form. So just like a reflection which is empty of existing by its own entity, right? Also, the reflection, it doesn't exist by its own power whatsoever. It's merely a kind of happenstance, a kind of adventitious arising through the force of certain causes and conditions coming together. The mirror, there being an object in front of the mirror, and light falling on the object. Through the force of those, which are all things other than a reflection. Like the mirror is not a reflection. The object in front of the mirror is not a reflection. The light falling on the object and falling into the mirror is not a reflection. But because those different causes come together, then a reflection arises. But the reflection has no power to exist by its own side. It's completely empty of existing, by its own power. But yet has the power to produce an eye consciousness seeing a reflection, right? So everything exists like that, right? So just as from an empty thing like a reflection, or perception can arise that bears its form, and then the next page, likewise, although all things are empty, so all things are empty of existing by their own power from their own side, and yet they do arise, likewise, all things are empty, they do arise from emptiness in a robust way. So they arise from emptiness and they have the power. The robust way means they have the power to produce a result, to produce results. So anyway, if that makes sense to you, you can meditate on that. But if it doesn't, just meditate on impermanence, that everything that that exists is momentarily arising and passing away and continually transforming. You can also use that to meditate on. But I'll remind you. So yeah, we'll stop. Since we don't have much time, I won't go through the verses by Nagarjuna there below. And you can just turn to page 9 and leave that page 9 on the desk in front of you. So it has a little drawing there of what we'll visualize, the Vajra on top of a moon disk. Looks like that. And it has these 2 mantras, which I'll recite, and the meaning of which is described on a subsequent page. Okay, so now we'll meditate a bit. So before we actually meditate, just kind of wiggle around a bit in your seat and make sure your body is relaxed, your legs are comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. When you're meditating, it's important, your body is relaxed and comfortable, right? Because any physical discomfort can easily become a big distraction and make so we can't focus. So gradually get comfortable in your seat and bring your attention to your breath. So we'll begin by going back to more or less the same visualization we did at the beginning of the session. So yeah, imagine all sentient beings seated around yourself again. And again, try to generate that bodhicitta motivation, thinking how all sentient beings are the same as me and wishing to have happiness and wishing to be free from suffering. And are the same as me and having the potential to achieve full enlightenment. And all of my well-being and happiness in this and past and all future lives up to enlightenment all comes about in dependence upon each and every one of these countless kind mother sentient beings. So then gradually, just like if you blow your breath on a mirror, then there's condensation. There's like a circle of condensation on the mirror. And then as it evaporates from the edges towards the center. So like that, and imagine from the periphery of sentient beings seated around you and the environment around you. Imagine it from the periphery in towards the center, you being at the center. It dissolves in all sentient beings and the environment gradually dissolve into emptiness. Or if you're more comfortable with impermanence, you think how all you and all phenomena are impermanent, and they dissolve into the space of impermanence or emptiness. So the visualization is like, they gradually dissolve into this pure, clear space pervaded by even kind of clear light. So from the periphery, imagine the environment and sentient beings gradually dissolve into emptiness. This empty space pervaded by a clear light. And gradually your own body, from the crown of your head and the bottom of your seat, and then from your left and right, from the front and back of your body, gradually towards the center of your heart chakra. Your body also dissolves into emptiness or into impermanence. Finally, there's just like a small drop at the center of your heart chakra, and that also dissolves into space. And then there's just an infinite expanse, a very pure space pervaded by clear light. light before dawn, autumn, to the sky. So here, again, it's important to have the recognition or the identification that this is me. So it's not like oneself and is an observer of this clear expanse, but oneself is this clear expanse. And that I is also empty. This clear expanse is empty of existing from its own side, or it's merely impermanent, changing moment by moment. Vast expanse, then remember compassion for all sentient beings. You know, your mother, father, friends, family, countless sentient beings who've been kind to you in this life and past lives. Remember how they suffer from sickness, confusion, misfortune, the tragedy of death and separation from loved ones, and so forth. Remembering how the self is just one among countless sentient beings, and the other sentient beings are numberless. And imagine you generate a genuine and powerful compassion, with and wishing to free sentient beings from their suffering. So this compassion pervades all the space. This great compassion, you wish to achieve full enlightenment. This compassion transformed into bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve full enlightenment. This appears as a moon disk in the center of the space. And here again, it's not that you're seeing this moon disk like in front of you, but you are the moon disk. Right? So you strongly identify. Imagine being this mind of great compassion and bodhicitta, appearing as a moon disk, in the center of this infinite space, pervaded by a clear light. You think this is me. So then, without forgetting or letting go of this compassion and bodhicitta, or if it's more comfortable, you can remember the impermanent nature of all phenomena. They're continually changing moment by moment. This moon disk, which is me, is changing moment by moment. The space is changing. All sentient beings are changing moment by moment. Or if you're comfortable with dependent arising, the understanding of dependent arising and emptiness. Imagine this mind of compassion and bodhicitta. It's accompanied by, or it has the discrimination, understanding emptiness. Who is this moon disk? All of space, all of sentient beings are, and everything that exists, this mind itself, are empty of existing from their own side or by their own power to generate this wisdom, realizing emptiness or realizing impermanence. Then imagine this wisdom takes the visual form of a white Vajra, five-pronged Vajra, standing upright upon this moon disk at the center of the space. And again, identify with that. Think this is me. I finally try to clarify this whole experience as one unified experience, right? So this vast infinite space pervaded by clear light, the center of which, like being at the center of my heart, is myself, my mind of great compassion and bodhicitta, conjoined with wisdom, realizing emptiness, realizing impermanence, appearing as a moon disk, upon which is a white Vajra standing upright. And this is me. This is my most fundamental nature. Okay. So then I recite these two mantras to invoke the blessings of all the Buddhas. Om Sarva Yoga Chitta Utpatayami. Om Sarva Yoga Chitta Utpatayami. Om Sarva Yoga Chitta Utpatayami. Om Surate Samayastam. O Siddhya Vajra Yata Sukam. Om Surate Samayastam. O Siddhya Vajra Yata Sukam. Om Surate Samayastam. O Siddhya Vajra Yata Sukam. So the first mantra, Sarva, Om Sarva Yoga Chitta Utpatayami means I pledge to abide by generating the all yoga mind. The second mantra, Om Surati Samaya Chitta Vajrayata Sukham Om, means Om, you are the one with the pledge of supreme happiness, or having accomplished the bliss and Vajra in this way. Just focus on this visualization and this kind of yoga for a moment again. can dedicate. There's a dedication on page 32 in the prayer book. Page 32. Is it? It should be this. That says dedication prayers, and then may the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta. Yes. Okay. Good. So just rejoice in whatever merit we've created in this session, and the merit created by all of the ordinary beings like ourselves, the merit created by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all of our teachers, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who continually emphasizes the practice, in general, the practice of great compassion and bodhicitta, and wisdom realizing, dependent arising from emptiness, and has brought so much, so much wisdom and light and guidance into so much benefit for countless beings in the world. We rejoice in all of that. So from life to life, may we be able to follow the guidance and instruction of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and receive teachings and guidance from him, and also our other teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche and others. And may the Buddha Dharma flourish. Sentient beings be free from every misfortune. Those who have died, may they quickly take rebirth in human form, or all beings have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment. Then bring to mind any other prayers you'd like to make. And then, so we can dedicate these prayers on page 32. May the Supreme Jewel, Bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, has arisen, not diminish, but increase more and more. Because of the merits of taking the ordination, we don't have to read that because we didn't do it. We'll skip down to the next verse. May all beings everywhere, plagued by suffering of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May and happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and things be effective, and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. Grace remains for as long as sentient beings remain. Till then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then we can jump to page 36. Those long life prayers, but it's whole Dalai Lama. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you're the source of all happiness and good. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. So this long life prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in the last line where it says, please, please live long, we can just replace it with, please, please return quickly. Like that. You serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine. Bountifully accomplished my Hipster prayers, honor me 3 years. Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please return quickly. And then especially we dedicate for the flourishing of Choe Khor Sum Ling Center, which is been in existence for so long now, since about 2006 or so. So may the center be free of any obstacles and have all conducive conditions in terms of yes, volunteers and support, material, and also support, time and energy. There's so much time and energy people have spent, sponsors and directors and board members and volunteers and SPC and everyone contributes to the center and built up something very wonderful, over a long time. It was a bit difficult during that, like for all Dharma centers around the world to continue through the pandemic. But now we hope the conditions can come together so more and more people can be involved with and benefit from the Buddhist teachings through Choe Khor Sum Ling. So thank you all, especially to Shandi and Dipti and Ratnakar and all those who currently or have served as board members or important volunteers for the center in the past. I feel very fortunate myself to have been involved with Choe Khor Sum Ling over so many years, and especially to invite many great lamas to come and teach here. So I pray that the center flourishes. And if there's any way I can help, of course, be in touch. Through the internet, we're not very far away from each other these days. So so if I can contribute or help out with the center anywhere in the future, of course, and I would like to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Geshe Legtsok.